Hello, class. I'd like to use this as some background today for your um, Flipgrid debate on principles versus politics, which is Unit 2 of your Taking Sides book. And you'll look at some readings um, related to the preservation of rural areas, or I should say wilderness areas in rural regions, and how that affects rural economies. So you're going to see a point and counterpoint about this. But just to give you a little background about the geoeconomics of rural areas, because many of us might not be familiar with this, and rural areas could also take into account developing countries, which tend to have a lot of rural areas. So when we look at the background of rural area resource economics, what we're going to see is countries vary in how much rural and how much developed areas they have. The United States is pretty much very rural compared to other areas, particularly around Europe. And we tend to see a lot of that rural area pretty much around central United States, but also in pockets along the East Coast and the West Coast. And one thing we learn about rural areas, the importance of them, is they provide a lot of essential resources for us that urban areas need. Urban areas basically provide the money for rural areas that export most of their resources. So let me give you a quick overview of some of the issues and some of the background about rural economy. So when we look at economies in different countries and even with our own countries, we know that a crucial influence on the development of these economies and the use of Earth's resources is the way that people make a living. So when we look at economies, it means how do we make a living, how do we bring in income, and how do we supply our needs? And this is going to differ greatly from rural and urbanized areas. In our taking sides today, or looking at points, counterpoints, we're going to be focusing on mostly rural, and then think about, though, how does rural serve the developed areas and urban areas. But generally, we can break down economic activities into primary, secondary, and tertiary. And primary generally refers to a sector that is part of the economy that draws raw materials from nature and the environment. And these are the basic economies that we had in ancient societies, which just were directly involved in removing resources. And today, the modern manifestation of that is agriculture, both animals and plants, and even horticultural. Raising animals for various reasons, not just agriculture. Fishing, hunting could also be included with that. Forestry, which means, natural resources from trees and plants. And then mining, which includes everything from petrol to mineral resources. So these going to see are a major part of what we call the primary sector, or the sector that directly includes jobs that draw materials from the environment. So when we look at many countries, the primary sector is still a large sector, but is particularly large in countries with low income or in regions with low income, regions that are kind of pre-industrial. That means still they don't see the benefits of high tech. And I mean, we have some areas in the United States that still don't have internet, adequate electrification of water, and they tend to be in this type of rural, almost pre-industrial situation. And then we look at rural areas in general tend to do a lot of this primary sector jobs. Now, the secondary sector is basically part of the economy that takes the raw materials, and we're talking about generally larger cities in semi-rural areas, but these cities have to usually be within distance of a major urban area, or also within a transportation line. So usually what we see is the rural areas export their natural and raw materials, and that goes into larger regions of that rural area or to major cities, where sometimes those resources travel great distances, but they're manufactured into goods. And some examples of this is we see many rural areas contain a lot of the petrol resources that we ship to our area for processing on the secondary sector market, either into fuel, into plastics, or into a whole bunch of other stuff. And again, this also includes taking natural resources like metals from the ground, again, to make machinery, automobiles. And again, what happens is we see an export of resource from these rural areas and the use of manual, usually low wages that feed into our economic sector in cities, which make a lot of money, meaning that secondary sector. Usually the secondary sector grows quickly as societies industrialize. And as societies industrialize, we see that we also have a tendency for further urbanization and what we call suburbanization or urban sprawl. Now we get to the tertiary sector, which some people actually break up into a tertiary 1 or 2 or a tertiary and a subset called a quaternary. But the major thing to understand about tertiary, this is what provides economic services and goods for us. So here we're looking at things like construction. We're taking the resources from the primary sector, the manufacturing from the secondary sector and turning it into a product that uses a variety of wages from low income to high salary wages. That could be construction, trade, which includes like retail, finance, real estate, tourism, which can include tourism for camping, tourism for hunting, fishing, as long as it's not for commercial purposes. Private services, again, this could be anything from retail to transportation. We see tertiary as government, and then there's transportation, which can be general transportation and other factors like air transportation, train, whatever. So just for information, we can look at comparative economic sectors of different countries, and we can look at China, which is still pretty much going to be a lot of agriculture, but also they've grown into a lot of manufacturing and now into a fair amount of tertiary services. So this is kind of incredible how they went from a really primary sector country to now going into secondary and tertiary. We could also look at countries like Iran, which again have an interesting balance. We could look at Mexico, which is shifting towards a lot of service. Nigeria, look at this. Now you can see Nigeria is truly what we call a emerging nation, because nations that have already emerged have a small primary and a larger percentage of tertiary. But look at over here where they fit into the rural model of what we see in the United States. And here's the whole country. Russia is, of course, heavily industrialized. United Kingdom, look at the small primary, and the United States, a tiny primary. Now, what's really dangerous about this situation here, once you get below about 10% of your sectors in your country are primary, that means you have very little resources. You're accessing very little resources, and also very few people are involved in those resources. And that becomes a very important issue when we look at the role of these rural areas. So in the United States, rural areas provide all our resources, but we don't see a lot of people within them. And also those resources are feeding a huge tertiary sector, which means the products that those things are being made into. So this is where we get into now, how do we balance what goes on, particularly in a country like ours? How do we use those rural primary areas? And how do we maintain them? How do we balance them? And how do we make sure that they maintain enough a percentage to keep this sector going? Because right now we're lucky. And if it wasn't for imports, particularly of resources that replace some of this sector here, we're in trouble. So when we look at how presidents make decisions about how to use resources, whether import or not, a lot of them are focusing on this balance between the primary and these tertiary regions, and particularly the rural, again, which is the primary, and the tertiary, which would be your large cities that do all these type of big activities. So when we start looking at how government deals with economic sectors. We know that economic sectors are necessary activities, and most of our people today are employed within these sectors, but disproportionately. And this is where we have to look at now resource distribution and how do we make decisions that deal with this disproportionality of labor. So again, when we look at rural areas, we're going to focus on they do a lot of agriculture, a fair amount of agriculture that we don't see in urban areas. I mean, we hear about what are called urban food deserts, in which urban areas do not provide the food that they need to sustain a population, in some cases not at all, and people have trouble getting access to inexpensive food. So rural areas have kind of like the market on that. That's not a pun, but have the market on that. And then forestry, where do we get our paper and wood goods from? Mineral resources, where do we get our minerals? Even in Texas, most of it's from rural areas. West Texas, North Texas, and around the Rio Bravo area, where there's not a lot of population density. Fuel resources. We do a lot of fuel processing in our area, but we don't do a lot of fuel extraction. Most of that comes from parts of West Texas. And then when we look at fuels globally, or even just, nationally, most of the resources, petrol, coal, natural gas, have to come from rural areas that then serve the urban areas with this. Rural areas tend to be very touristy, particularly for their wilderness. This is the basis of your case study today, is to compare a policy that was put in place in the 80s, and you'll see a video on this, and then something that was put a little more teeth into this law by President Obama several years ago, where he said wilderness areas should be protected from everything in the spirit of setting up preserves that no one can come in and develop these areas. Well, how does this affect rural economies, where in the past, wilderness was a source of agriculture, forestry, mineral resources, and fuel resources, and tourism? You hear about these arguments all the time, particularly in Alaska, where we have large wilderness areas that are sitting on every resource imaginable. I mean, billions of dollars of gold, diamonds, petrol, you name it. And this is true again for many states. And when you see rural economies also are based on transportation. That means how do we stockpile and store and distribute materials from rural areas to secondary and tertiary economy areas. So that involves things like Amazon warehouses, grain silos, storage areas that are a major part of the rural economy. So in your arguments, you're going to focus on, in your readings, rural areas that have overlapping purposes. They could be used for minerals, they could be used for tree resources, as you can see in this picture. They could be used for hunting, or if you want a free-range cattle or free-range chicken, whatever you want a free-range, you can send animals in there to feed or use that area to grow feed. We could also preserve it and keep it away from everything. So these wilderness areas are very diverse in these rural regions, and they could have multi-purposes. Now, when part of your case study is based on policy put in by Obama, who wanted to turn these wilderness areas, many of them literally a step at a time, into preservation areas with the cooperation of the state and sometimes without the cooperation of state officials. And what preservation means is nothing's allowed in there. Sometimes no humans, no vehicles, or at least no gas vehicles. It means you have to have some type of park transportation to get in, like buses or whatever, registered by the park or run by the park. And sometimes they have restricted vehicles. That means like just cars but no campers. And then we have conservation, where we can take resources like minerals, trees, and petrol out, and it also encourages sustainable economic products that we can regrow and maintain that rural area or wilderness area. And then we can look at the exploitation mode, or what we call the developmental mode, which we recognize wilderness areas for reclamation. That means taking that land and using it, over and over again, and returning it to the best resource possible, or we can just destructively use it, like many mining operations just go in, take away the trees, the rocks, and leave behind open pits. You'll actually see these sometimes as you drive along East Texas, particularly into Oklahoma. So we're going to end this now, and you're going to have an assignment to watch a few videos and then to produce a Flipgrid on Unit 2 called Does Redesigning Wildlands Harm Rural Economies? And this might not directly relate to you, but just think about if a rural economy is ruined, where do you get your food? Where do you get your minerals? Where do you get a lot of your resources? And what does that do to the cost of those resources if they become scarce? Because rural areas are already declining and losing people, losing economies. I mean, literally in the age group, the average age is going up to the point where when you're going to have a whole cohort population is going to die and leave a very dwindling population to work those jobs, who may just leave those jobs and go to major cities to find other employment, which leaves open this fact that if we can't get materials from ourselves, who do we get it from? And that can elevate costs if we import resources. So have fun.